and welcome to Ask the TA, a periodic segment on HCAT where viewers can send questions for the town administrator and other town representatives to answer for the benefit of all Holliston stakeholders. I'll read the question for discussion today and then introduce my guests. What does the term safe and supportive schools mean? Specifically, what work is outlined by the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, also known as DESE, regarding safe and supportive schools? To answer that question, I have with me School Superintendent Susan Kustka, the Director of SEL and Equity, Jariel Vergne, and the 4 school principals in the Holliston Public Schools, Principals List, Jordan, Keim, and Slaney. Thank you all for being with me today. I'm going to start it off by transitioning to Dr. Kustka. Could you share some of the work happening in the building that helps create a safe and supportive learning environment for students and teachers?
Sure, and thank you so much for having us here today, Travis. We're delighted to be here. And actually, one of the roles we've hired in the recent years is our Director of SEL and Equity. And Jariel has been working pre-K to 12 with all principals and staff. So I'd like him to answer some of the work that we're doing district-wide. And then if principals wanted to add some specific things at the building level, we can add that as well.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to share a little bit about some of the context that I think is framing our conversation today. We're really kind of thinking about safe and supportive schools, especially how it's framed across the state. So what that means is that we're asking all schools, but including here the schools in the Holliston Public Schools, to think about the social emotional learning needs of our students, to think about what does it take to build a safe and supportive school. In building a safe and supportive school, there's various aspects that go into that. That includes thinking about how to include the voices of all of our stakeholders, students, staff, families. Thinking about what's the right data that tells us that our students feel that they attend a school where they feel that they belong, that they feel connected to on a daily basis. What's the data that tells us that our staff equally feel connected to their school in that same way, and that our families feel welcomed to walk into our schools every day on behalf of their children, their students just as well. It also calls for us to really think about how do we align the work, right? We had a show about a year ago, possibly maybe months ago, where we talked about the rising mental health needs in our communities. And a safe and supportive school calls for us to think about the mental health needs of our students, to think about the culturally responsive practices necessary to connect with students on an everyday basis. And it calls for us to strategically think about what are the skills that we want to uplift in our students to navigate the 21st century stresses that our kids navigate every day, right? Social media, peer-to-peer relationships, etc. So a safe and supportive school calls us to align and to integrate that work into what we do every day. It is not easy work, but in that work, it is really geared and targeted towards how do we make sure our students feel that they belong? How do we make sure that our students feel they're connected to their school, to their peers, to their teachers who are in their lives every day, right? How do we create that environment? And that's really what this work's about. And research has told us that if we constantly move towards that, our kids do better. They do better when it comes to achievement, they do better when it comes to relationships, and they do better overall. And that's what this work's about. I'm excited because we have our principals here with us here today, and there's a lot of meaningful work happening at each of our schools. And with that, I'd love to kind of turn it over to our co-leaders here with us today who lead this work passionately at each of their buildings. And there might be something they'd like to share that's connected to that framework at the building level.
Do we want to start and go around with an example of the work in each building?
Yeah, that's fine. I think at the high school, being new, there's a lot to learn about the community, about the school. One thing that I learned very quickly was that the sense of belonging, the relationships, the social emotional learning was an important aspect of the high school. And so we've been spending a lot of time at the high school working with, at the state level, with the SEB Academy, the Social Emotional Behavior Academy, and working to really understand what relationships exist within the schools. We've been focusing with the staff on relationship mapping, looking at how students are connected to our staff, making sure they have that one trusted adult in the building that they can go to, bring things in like Sandy Hook Promise to make sure students feel safe and supported in the school in that way as well. That's just one of the examples we're doing at the high school.
And that has been rolled out recently, so could you just kind of give a primer on the Sandy Hook Promise?
Yeah, Sandy Hook Promise is an anonymous reporting system that allows students, families to report instances of violence or suspected violence or bullying, hate speech, anything that they feel they need support on, that they may not feel comfortable going to the trusted adults, which we hope they have, but want to give them another outlet to access, to let us know that something might be happening.
That's great. Thank you.
And kind of to build off what Mr. List had indicated there, you know, a lot of this, we're able to root this in Metro West Adolescent Health Survey data that is more kind of regionally normed data that our students are assessed on at the middle school level and high school level. Additionally, kind of based off of that, we have our own kind of culture and climate survey that we do within the district as well. That provides us some kind of internal data as far as also looking at some of the qualitative things to kind of assess what partnerships we might have in the district, external partnerships, where maybe we don't have that internal expertise to kind of bring that equity work. Mr. List talked about Sandy Hook and Sandy Hook Promise, the group that was created out of that, is not only partnering with their ARS, their anonymous reporting system, but also with their Start with a Hello initiative. Similarly, we have similar partnerships at the middle school and in the district with the Anti-Defamation League, the ADL. Specifically at the middle school is the ADL Peer Leadership Program, which is to kind of train about 50 of our students to become kind of peer leaders of this work in our school, which kind of plants that seed for us as well. Similar to that, the Department of Ed has several new and strong academies, and I imagine Mr. Keim is going to talk a little bit about something that we share, which is working with the Culturally Responsive Education Academy with the Department of Ed, which is educating currently 10 of our educators at the middle school and walking them through a multi-year process to become more culturally responsive educators here at the school.
Great. Thank you. Elementary schools?
So he talked about the culturally responsive education. One of the big things they talked about that, or one of the beginning things is, do you know your students in your classroom? And so that's as simple as knowing how to pronounce a student's name. Mr. List talked about belonging. One of the things we started this year was a student advisory council of students at every grade level. We used to have a 5th grade leadership team, but that only focused on kind of like exterior things. This is actually building skills within our students. And so that first meeting, what we did was we asked them to look at their name. And we all went around to pronounce their name to make sure we all understood how to say their name so that they felt good. We challenged those students to go back to their classroom to make sure that they could pronounce all of their classmates' names because that's so important. Your name is who you are. In our second meeting, we talked about belonging. First off, we need to make sure that every student knows that they belong, but they also need to take that back to the classroom and, you know, make sure that they have classmates that feel like they belong. So that's some of the things that we're doing at Miller.
That's great. Dr. Slaney.
So at Placentino, we always say that our foundation, what we do at Placentino, is social emotional learning. I mean, these are 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, till 7-year-olds, and they're learning not only how to be students, but they're learning how to interact with others for often the first time ever. So this is our bread and butter. This is what we do every day, and we weave it into our work. And when we think about feeling safe and supportive, it's about relationships. And we actually designed last year a culture survey for our students. There's no normed survey for K-2, and we created one because we really felt like our students' voice matter as well, and they have a lot to say. And what we were really proud of is that I believe it was 98% felt like they had at least one adult that they felt a really strong connection to. And for us, that was a success, because if they feel that they have a relationship with someone who sees them and hears them and makes them feel valued, they're able to feel safe in the school. So from there, this year, we have a few initiatives. One that is happening actually throughout our school system, through the middle school, is called PBIS, which is Positive Behavior Interventions and Supports, which is how we support all of our students and our staff with common language, common expectations. When a student knows what is expected of them and knows kind of like the boundaries, they feel safer, they feel supported in that environment. Another initiative that we're doing through RAMS is called Ruler, which is going to be our new social emotional approach. And we're starting this year with the adults. So it's about learning emotional intelligence, learning about what are feelings, what are emotions, that there are no bad feelings, no bad emotions. And when we as adults start to recognize that in ourselves and others, we feel supported with each other, and then we're able to support our students too. So we're really excited about a lot of the work that's happening.
That's great. And as you were mentioning some of the things happening with these very young people, I'm realizing my first grader is also doing all those things while losing his teeth, and it's
Yeah.
a lot going on for somebody
Tying
that
their
age.
shoe, learning to read.
Absolutely. So I think we covered a lot as we went around the table there. I think just for somebody at home who's thinking about the curriculum specifically, I think we touched on some of it, but if I'll start back with Dr. Kustka, you know, the support of this work related specifically to curriculum and instruction, what should somebody at home know about sort of the work going on in that realm?
Yeah, so one of the things we've done in recent years, we were, in 2022, we implemented our 5-year strategic plan that goes through 2027. And actually you were part of that work, and everyone at these tables were part of that work. And we surveyed community members. We had over 1,000 responses to some of the concerns related to safe and supportive schools, equity, teaching and learning. We heard a common theme of people wanting a more rigorous education and equitable opportunities for students. So one of the strategic initiatives that we developed on that plan was that we were going to do an equity audit. So this is year 2 of our plan. We spent last year, and we had an outside consultant come in, and they looked at our schedules, they looked at our programs, they looked at our demographics, they looked at all of the things that could create inequities in a school system. It wasn't completely exhaustive because we had limitations as to what we could accomplish and what we could prioritize over recent years. But we got a number of recommendations, and we shared out that equity audit, I think it was in October, with the community. And that has led us to our next phase of this work is an equity steering committee. So thankfully, the Director of SEL and Equity, Jariel Vergne, is going to lead that steering committee, and that group is going to be encompassing students, community members, parents, teachers, administrators, and they're going to really focus on looking at those recommendations and what can we do at Hollis Public Schools to show some more equity within all of our programs. Again, it's not exhaustive. We can't do everything, but we need to start somewhere. And again, tying it back to our strategic plan, what can we do next year and then throughout our 2027 and then revise along the way. So this work is really important, and I think all of us recognize that. It's a lot of work. We have your children for 6.5 hours a day, but it's a critical part of their development when they're with their peers, when they're learning from their teachers, so we take this work really seriously.
Great. And so Jariel or anybody else at the table, in terms of what a parent or a member of the community might expect in terms of curriculum now in the future as it relates to this work, is there anything we want to touch on for the audience?
I'd be happy to jump in.
Sure.
Just what came out of the strategic plan, but also even how we look at lesson creation or curriculum creation is through a mindset of like universal design learning, or UDL, meaning that something is universally acceptable or universally accessible. Sorry, and you know, past practices we've done, we've looked at 7 forms of bias, being kind of like how do we look at our curriculum through a bias lens that exists, partnerships with Massachusetts Partnership for Youth, and how we look at curriculum through that lens, but also more recently working with the Department of Ed with their Culturally Responsive Education Academy, is to specifically work with a group of our teachers and educators, and it's meant to be a multi-year process of taking intensive 10 versus generalizable across the whole school, one and done. You focus intensive professional development on curriculum development with 10 educators, including lots of support and observation and deep dive into their curriculum work, so that as they are developing lessons and aligning their curriculum, they're universally designing it so that it is culturally sustainable for all.
I think just adding to that too, one of the things that during COVID had slowed down, and even prior to COVID, we had been a little bit remiss in doing our curriculum review process, which really should be done all content areas in a cycle over a 5-year process. So we have re-implemented curriculum reviews. Tonight we actually have a math forum, and the math forum is going to discuss what type of curriculum resources we need that also embody the equity that we need for our students. I think part of that conversation is, do we have access to programs for all students? Because what we find is sometimes that there are barriers that we innately have put up to entry to certain programs, whether it's higher level classes or just we happen to have a Montessori program and a French immersion program, and there are limitations related to all of these, but the pros outweigh the cons. So we need to look at them even more closely. How can we make sure that students have access points at multiple levels and they're not locked out of opportunities? And that's part of the work that we'll be doing with this Equity Steering Committee as well.
Right, and so the Equity Steering Committee in that regard is really going to be looking at some of these curriculum questions, answering it. It might be that there's no change necessary in the future. It might be that there are changes called for. And so what is sort of the timeline of that steering as you get going?
Yeah, so the Equity Audit Steering Committee is really going to be focused on the recommendations that came out of the equity audit. That's the focus. But it's a diverse group of voices coming together, which in all honesty hasn't always, we always haven't created spaces at that table to make sure that we actively ensure that it's a diverse table of voices coming together. So one, we're starting there. The second piece is going to be is to really think about, in a diverse group of stakeholders, you're going to have students, families, educators, administrators. Each one of those voices bring with them their experience and their interaction with the school system, their interaction with curriculum, their interaction with the schools. In many ways, what's going to come out of that is direct recommendations for the district, for the school committee, around what are some of the places we believe it would be most fruitful for us to start, how that could possibly look like, and provide some thoughts around what we believe some of the impact of that would be if we started in said place. In that, and I know in many ways, we're going to have conversations around curriculum and instruction, but not from the purpose of telling the district what to purchase, what to use, but what are the things we'd love for the district to consider when thinking about making decisions about curriculum, when thinking about making decisions around instruction. What are the experiences, what has been the past experiences of those at the table, and what are the things we'd love for people to consider when making future considerations for that as well.
Yeah, I think we've talked about this. We don't want it to be something separate.
Yeah.
We want it to be a lens that we always look through. So we're in the middle of a math curriculum review. The secondary is in the middle of English language arts. So for instance, when we think about curriculum, instruction, and materials, we don't want it to be a separate piece of a different committee that's looking at equity and inclusion and diversity. We want every stakeholder to be able to have that lens to look through. Is this creating access for all? What are students seeing? Are they seeing themselves in the materials? When they see themselves in others, we call that windows and mirrors. Do they see themselves in others? We want to make sure that we're portraying not a single story. We want to make sure there's not stereotypes being perpetuated about different people. We want to open up that world. David talks a lot about students being global citizens at the middle school. We want to make sure they see the world beyond just Holliston, beyond who's just sitting next to them, beyond who is in their neighborhood. That's our job. But when we do that in a separate committee, it's an add-on, and we want it to be part of our work.
That's great. And so I think part of that, and this is schools, but it's the town in general. It's everybody at the moment. Attracting and retaining diverse candidates is a big part of how you build some of what you've all talked about. If you could talk on some of the strategies you've utilized to sort of build that and be part of this work as you move forward.
Well, as much as we all love Holliston, Holliston is a little bit inaccessible. We don't have commuter rail here like some of our neighboring communities, so that does create a barrier when we're trying to attract candidates from all over and increase our diverse candidates as well. That being said, we have been doing more to try to show them what a wonderful place this is to work. One of the groups we partnered with in the recent years is the Mass Partnership for the Diversity in Education. I think it's statewide, but there's a lot of focus in this area.
Over about 50 50 school districts engaged.
Yeah, so they have monthly meetings that we've attended. Mr. Vergne and I have both attended job fairs where we have only diverse candidates to meet and get resumes from that. And we have gotten candidates from these searches, so we still have a lot of work to do to improve in that area. But I do have some data that I wanted to share today, because when I look back, I feel like we have done a better job in recent years since I've been here, because we really do try to think with that lens in the hiring process. So in the last few years, I can tell you that we've hired, and this is because people self-report as part of the hiring process, so that doesn't mean they all report, so there could be more than this. But minimally, I can tell you that we've had 17 candidates that we've hired that identify as Asian. We've had 15 that identify as Hispanic or Latino, and we have had 5 that identify as Black. Now again, is that enough? No. It's not reflective of the students in front of us at this point. However, that has been a marked difference in recent years, that we are really focused on that and trying to bring people in. But then once they're here, what can we do to retain them, and providing additional supports? And that's part of the work we've been trying to do with the mentoring process when they enter our district, in the induction in the summer. But again, this is still an area of growth for us, but I am proud that we are working and concernedly moving in that direction. Do you want to add anything to that?
I guess what I'd add, right, is in everything we do, there's always gaps. And one of the areas that I know that we're going to be working towards is as a district identifying a belief statement, right? And when I say belief statement in the sense of all our students benefit from having diverse staff in front of them. Yeah. Every single student. As staff, we benefit from that just as well, right? Being clear about why it is that we want to retain and recruit diverse candidates. It's not just because it's a mandate or because it's a suggestion. It's because we really believe that all of our students benefit from having diverse candidates in front of them. And diverse candidates, when we think of diversity is across multiple identities, right? Around multiple pieces when we discuss what we mean by diversity. So as a district, one of the things that we want to make sure that we get better at is being explicit about that. Because also when we go to recruit diverse candidates, being explicit, as being someone who represents as Latino myself, I want to be connected to a district that is clear about why you want me to be a part of that community, right? So that's a gap for us that we need to make sure we do, because I think it'll put us in a stronger footing when we are in competition with our local communities. And it's not a negative competition, but we are all going to these job fairs looking for recruiting highly qualified staff. But to do that, we also want to be clear as to why you should pick Holliston, right? Why Holliston's a great place for you to be connected to.
I would also add just, for us as folks that do the predominance of the interviewing and the looking at resumes in the district, we've done a lot of professional development on kind of understanding our biases in the hiring process. How do we look at resumes? How do we read cover letters? Who benefits from how we have historically looked at resumes and cover letters and experience in the past? I think similarly is once we do hire and we may have a staff member of color inside of our school, how are we mentoring and supporting that individual to feel accepted and their ability to access resources and partnerships and friendships and explicit mentors that are assigned, and more of those silent mentors, friend mentors that are able to help them kind of navigate the building, which are oftentimes the things that lead to retention of that.
Both Mr. Jordan and Dr. Kustka talked about the mentoring. One of the things we did this year that I think is helping us retain some of our paraprofessionals is we created a paraprofessional liaison to work with new paraprofessionals that are in the building to, not only help them know the routines in the building, but to help them meet, greet other staff members in the building. And at least at Miller, and I think it's gone in the other buildings, it's really helped the relationships that they're building that help you retain staff in your building.
That's great. And I think, obviously, this is not a Holliston Public School specific issue, right? This is across the board. This is all school districts. This is on the town side, right? Recruitment and retention is, we're a people business as a town, as a school, the services we provide. So I think that's excellent context within this. And I just want to bring it back again, to safe and supportive schools, I want people to understand if this is the first time they're hearing the term at home, this is obviously not a new concept. This has been going on. And so, as I think Dr. Kustka mentioned from the beginning in the strategic planning process, which you're now in the middle of, and I appreciated being invited to, was a very broad group that was assembled there. You've started a lot of this. I think you've all given great examples of what's going on, but how are you going to sustain this moving forward? What are you doing? What do you need from the community? What do you need from the town to support? I think really as you move forward, I think you've set the tone. How are you going to sustain this? What do you need for support?
I think, again, connecting it back to the long-term sustainability plan with the strategic plan is so critical. They talked about the CRE work that we're doing, all the trainings with Ruler. They're not a one and done. We really made a concerted effort that we're looking ahead as a multi-year plan for professional development so that we can sustain the work that we're doing in all of these areas related to equity, related to safe and supportive schools. And I'm happy to let people speak to that, but I just want to make a couple other points. The other thing is looking at some work in the community. I mentioned it earlier. We have your students for 6.5 hours a day. It's a huge part of their life, but you have them on the weekends, holidays, vacations, summers, all day after school. And we need the community to support this work as well. So one of the things that you and I have started to facilitate in the community is the Holliston Coalition Against Hate and Bias. We have seen an uptick in incidents of hate and bias as a community, as a school system, but this is nothing new as well. This hate and bias has been happening for centuries, and I think the thing that we're doing differently in recent years is we're trying to be as transparent as possible, because we cannot fix this problem alone. So reaching out to our community leaders was a new initiative that we just started, and we're excited about that work. Building community leaders that can echo the work that we're trying to replicate in the schools. And then also some of the work that I think both Mr. List and Dr. Jordan can speak to is we have our Project 351 work that's happening with our high school students into the middle school. That's also about sustainability. We're training student leaders that can lead some of this work with their peers, because we all know that they listen better when it's coming directly from their peers. How can they become student leaders that are not afraid to be speaking up when they see incidents of hate and bias in the schools and saying this is not okay? I truly believe when the students feel confident to speak up, their peers will speak up as well, and I think that's the best thing we can do to sustain this work. If you wanted to speak a little further to that.
Yeah, what we want to do is empower student voice in this, and so through Project 351, through our advisory programs and our student advisory leaders, those opportunities to train students to really lead these conversations is really a goal at the end for us in order to sustain it, because if it becomes a part of our building culture, then it's something that's sustainable. Thinking back to what Dr. Slaney said about the lens through which we look at everything, also making sure that all of our PD, all of our trainings really highlight a lens of focus on equity. And if we're asking ourselves that question as we're looking through curriculum, as we're running programs, as we're bringing in groups, as we're adding new classes, that's the work that will make it sustainable for a long time.
I think similar to talking about the Project 351, specifically like the Celtic playbook that comes out of Project 351, it is connected and similar to even the ADL peer leadership work. It is around developing peer models. I think what any parent of a middle schooler and high schooler, since you've had a middle schooler, would know is that your typical middle schooler is genetically programmed to not listen to their parents. So the same thing applies sometimes to adults at that age group. And that's developmentally appropriate for them. This is the point at which it's not uncommon in many of our neighboring communities to see upticks in middle schoolers specifically. I'm in Needham, and we're having similar struggles in Needham as well at the middle school level as far as that age group. It's an age group that's designed to start to leave the nest and challenge historical norms. Sometimes that can be a positive thing, and sometimes that can be negative. And it's important for us as a community to be all on the same page. As Dr. Kustka said before, it does take a village to raise the students of Holliston. And I think most of us who work but also have moved to the town of Holliston are here for children, are here for the school system, and are here for kind of that community feel. I was refreshed and excited by our coalition meeting that you were a part of, Travis, and Dr. Kustka is a part of, in bringing community hats together, people who have kind of oversee or have the mindset of one community perspective, and our ability to kind of collaborate to identify community-wide initiatives or strategies to tackle hate and bias.
Thank you. Anything about sustainability in the elementary schools you'd like to touch on?
I think, we've got to bring the parents in when we're, after we're training our students, after we're training our staff in Ruler, we've got to bring the parents in and make sure that they're on board with the things that we're doing, because it takes us all to be able to do this, but the parent ed that we need to do on our side to help them understand what we are doing in the schools, I think is a key factor.
I think when we think about sustainability and change, like if you do any research on change process, deep change doesn't happen overnight. Actually, when things happen quickly, research actually shows that it goes away quickly as well. So I think, and I understand the desire for change to happen immediately and for people to see change immediately. That being said, it takes time as we are changing and developing mindsets and beliefs and really doing some unlearning as well, adults, children, and our community members together. And I think the word that comes to mind of how we're going to sustain this is partnerships, and understanding and leaning in to support each other through the work. If we have a partnership with ourselves amongst the schools and amongst our parents and our community members, what we could do would be incredible. So I think for sustainability, we have to think of a longer-term plan that has very specific goals of how we're all going to meet that to create safe and supportive schools for our students and families.
Great.
Yeah, I just wanted to add just some pieces that I think, I heard and kind of what we highlighted that speaks to sustainability. But just before I touch on that, I just wanted to share that in many ways, what you heard in this room today, a lot of the people moving the work are passionate educators at our building level. And I can't tell you, I can look at every school and think about something being moved by an educator, not because they're part of an initiative, but because they care deeply about this work, right? And when this work is moved by our students through advocacy, when it's moved by our educators because they connected to it and they're driving the work, that right there is the first step to creating something sustainable, right? Because it's not based on a budget. It's not based on an initiative. It's based on the why they got into education. It's based on the students' why as to why they're connected to the ADL program, or why they're part of a peer leader, or they want to be a leader at the high school, right? Providing opportunities for that to happen is part of sustainability. And I think that the other piece that I just want to highlight that I heard in every single statement was that we're focused on relationships. We're focused on connections, right? Peer-to-peer, student to staff. And we're focused on creating opportunities for advocacy for students. All three of those are protective factors for our students. So when we think about mental health, when we think about incidents of bias, when we think about issues around bullying, protective factors around relationships, connections, and advocacy are key components that every school district wants to build in. And in every initiative I heard that. So to me, that speaks to sustainability, right? The work is being driven because of this work. And I think over time, right, as we create time, the work's going to be enhanced, where research tells us that if we get this work right, it positively impacts the other work just as well.
I think it's also about providing, as we've talked about with our coalition, safe spaces to have difficult conversations, right? We cannot shy away because this work is too important, and we cannot watch our students or community members being hurt by hate and bias that might be present, or not having a safe space to be embraced in. And that's also why we're here to talk about this work to the community, because we are not perfect. We are not saying we've got everything right and we've got this all set. It's because we need the community help. We want the help. We're trying to bring you in and show you a little bit of our lens. We send out what we're doing in the schools every day, constantly. We do community newsletters. We do daily communications. We are on social media, tweeting and Insta and all of those. But people are very busy and they might miss something important. So this is just another way we felt like this would be a good opportunity to, I'll be sending out this communication to families, and they'll see just another lens of us being able to communicate some of the work, because we do think it's really important and we're committed to it.
Great. And I think, I think we highlighted here, you mentioned earlier, a math curriculum. People have an opportunity to come hear directly about those types of things. So there's always ways in which people can see if you're specifically concerned as a viewer right now about curriculum. There's a way to follow along with that, how this impacts it. If you're more concerned about your child belonging within the school system, there's materials, and we'll sort of close with that. Just before we close, is there anything else we feel we didn't touch on that a viewer at home would need to know about safe and supportive schools and the topic? Okay, great. Well, thank you all for being with me. Thank you, my guests from the Holliston Public Schools. If you would like to follow up on materials related to the safe and supportive schools, please visit the website on the screen below. If you have a question that you would like answered in a future segment of Ask the TA, please email us at the address on the screen below. Thank you.